Karen, after 16 years, your skills no longer match our vision, Megan declared flatly, her face filling my laptop screen. Your access ends today. I smiled and replied, I completely understand. She looked relieved by my professional response. The Zoom call had been unexpected. A last-minute meeting request with Megan Russo, my team lead, and Jessica from Human Resources joining silently. I had given nearly 2 decades to Hollowgate Systems in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I built their operations department from scratch, mentored countless junior staff members through the years, and handled every crisis with calm precision. But Hollowgate had changed. 6 months ago, a corporate restructuring brought in new leadership and new priorities. Megan had been hired from outside, younger, hungry, and determined to make her mark. She had barely taken the time to understand our systems before starting to replace them. And now, apparently, it was my turn to be replaced. We'll need your laptop shipped back by Wednesday, Jessica chimed in, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who had delivered this speech many times before. I'll email you the shipping details and exit paperwork. Of course, I said, maintaining my composure. Is there anything else you need from me before I go? Megan shook her head. That will be all, Karen. Thank you for your years of service. The call ended abruptly, and I sat back in my chair, staring at the blank screen. 16 years. Over just like that. What Megan didn't know was that I had already accepted an offer as director of operations at Ironwood Forge, Hollowgate's largest competitor, starting Monday morning. 3 weeks earlier, Douglas Williams, the CEO of Ironwood, had reached out after hearing rumors of the changes at Hollowgate. We had known each other professionally for years, occasionally crossing paths at industry conferences. Karen, he had said during our first meeting, Hollowgate is making a mistake if they're sidelining you. We've always admired your operational expertise. We could use someone with your knowledge and experience. The offer had come a week later. A substantial salary increase, directorial status, and the freedom to build my own team. I had signed the contract yesterday. I closed my laptop and glanced at my phone. 2 text messages had arrived during the Zoom call. The first was from my husband, Tom. How did it go? Call me when you're done. The second was from Douglas. Office ready for Monday. Team excited to meet you. This is the beginning of something great. I smiled to myself. Megan had no idea what was coming. I met Tom 16 years ago at a tech conference in Chicago. He was presenting a session on network security. I was there representing my previous employer. We connected over coffee during a break, and the conversation never really stopped. 6 months later, we were married, and I had accepted an offer from Hollowgate Systems to move to Minneapolis and build their operations department. The early years at Hollowgate were exhilarating. We were a smaller company then, nimble and innovative. I had the freedom to implement my ideas, to create efficient systems, to build something meaningful. My team grew from just me to 25 talented professionals managing operations for a rapidly expanding business. Our former CEO, Harold Wilson, had been my biggest champion. Karen, he would say, you're the backbone of this company. Without you keeping everything running smoothly, we'd fall apart. Harold retired last year, and everything changed. The board brought in Vivian Torres, a hard-charging executive from a larger tech firm with a reputation for aggressive growth strategies. Torres wasted no time reshaping the company and her image. Longtime employees were gradually replaced with her own people. Policies changed. Priorities shifted. Megan Russo was one of Torres's first hires, 35 years old, with an impressive resume but little experience in our specific industry. She was placed above me, despite my tenure and institutional knowledge. "We need fresh perspectives," Torres announced in the all-hands meeting introducing Megan. "New blood to take us to the next level." I tried to make it work. I shared everything I knew, documented processes, offered insights based on years of experience. But Megan seemed determined to establish her territory, dismissing my suggestions and gradually excluding me from meetings where operations were discussed. The writing had been on the wall. I wasn't surprised by today's Zoom call, just by the timing. I had expected at least the courtesy of a transition period. "They did what?" Tom exclaimed when I called him after the meeting. His outrage on my behalf was touching but unnecessary. "It's fine, really," I assured him. "This gives me the perfect excuse to take the weekend off before starting at Ironwood on Monday." "You're taking this remarkably well," Tom said, suspicion creeping into his voice. He knew me too well. "Let's just say I've had time to prepare mentally," I replied. "And I might have a bit of satisfaction knowing that while Megan thinks she's eliminated a problem, she's actually created a much bigger one for Hollowgate." "Remind me never to cross you," Tom laughed. "Too late," I teased. "You already did when you ate the last piece of chocolate cake last weekend." That evening, I went through my home office, sorting materials from 16 years at Hollowgate. Most would be shredded. I had been careful never to bring confidential information home, but habits formed over years of proprietary work were hard to break. I paused over a photo of my original team. 5 of us crammed into Hollowgate's first real office, celebrating our first major client implementation. Harold Wilson stood in the center, arm around my shoulders, pride evident on his face. Of the people in that photo, only I had remained until today. The others had moved on years ago. I wondered if any of them might be interested in joining me at Ironwood. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie, my former mentee who had left Hollowgate 6 months ago when the first signs of change appeared. "Heard the news. Their loss. Drinks tomorrow? Maxwell's at 7? I smiled and replied, "You're on. Have interesting news to share." Natalie had flourished under my guidance, growing from an eager but inexperienced college graduate into a talented operations specialist. When she left Hollowgate, several clients had asked about her absence. I suspected Torres and Megan had underestimated her impact, just as they had mine. I continued sorting papers, occasionally setting aside notes or documents that might be useful in my new role. Nothing confidential. Nothing that would breach my employment contract with Hollowgate, but the accumulation of wisdom and insight that belonged to me alone. Around midnight, an email arrived from Jessica in HR. "Karen, attached, please find your exit paperwork and instructions for returning company property. On behalf of Hollowgate Systems, we thank you for your years of dedicated service and wish you all the best in your future endeavors." The coldness of the generic message stung more than I wanted to admit. 16 years reduced to a form letter. I shut down my computer and went to join Tom, who was reading in bed. "You know," he said, looking up from his book, "I don't think I've ever seen you this calm after a major life change." I slid under the covers beside him. "That's because this isn't the end of something. It's the beginning." "Still," Tom persisted, "you dedicated nearly 2 decades to Hollowgate. You built something meaningful there. It can't be easy to just walk away." I sighed, acknowledging the truth in his words. "I'm not walking away from what I built. I'm taking the best parts with me. The knowledge, the experience, the relationships. Hollowgate may have decided they don't need me anymore, but they'll soon realize how much they've lost." Their mistake is Ironwood's gain, Tom said, squeezing my hand. And mine, I added. I've outgrown Hollowgate. I just didn't know it until they forced me to see it. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. Maxwell's was pleasantly crowded for a Saturday evening. I spotted Natalie in our usual corner booth, 2 glasses of wine already waiting. There she is, Natalie said as I approached, the latest casualty of the Torres regime. Former casualty, I corrected, sliding into the booth. Current victor. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Do tell. I filled her in on my new position at Ironwood, watching her expression shift from sympathy to delight to something like awe. Director of Operations at Ironwood? Karen, that's brilliant, she exclaimed. The look on Megan's face when she finds out, I would pay to see that. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, though I couldn't completely suppress a smile. Of course not, Natalie replied, not believing me for a second. You're doing it for the career advancement and the opportunity to work with a company that actually values your expertise. Exactly. But the revenge is a nice bonus, she added with a grin. I laughed. Maybe a small bonus. We clinked glasses. So, Natalie leaned forward, what's your first move going to be? Building a team, I said. Douglas has given me considerable latitude there. Interesting, Natalie swirled her wine. Any particular talent you have in mind? Actually, yes. I met her gaze directly. You. Natalie blinked. Me? Senior Operations Manager, reporting directly to me. 20% salary increase over your current position, plus better benefits. I slid a folder across the table. The official offer is in there. Douglas approved it yesterday. Natalie opened the folder, quickly scanning the document inside. Her eyes widened at the numbers. This is very generous, she said cautiously. It's what you're worth, I replied. I've always said you were underpaid at Hollowgate. But wouldn't this seem like poaching? I finished for her. Of course it is. But you left Hollowgate months ago, so technically, I'm poaching from Trivalent Corp. Still, Natalie hesitated. It will look like we planned this. We didn't, I said firmly. But I'd be a fool not to bring in the best operations specialist I know. And Douglas agrees. Natalie turned the pages slowly, considering. When would you need an answer? Take the weekend, I said, but I start Monday, and I'd like you there with me. Natalie closed the folder and tucked it into her bag. You know I've always wanted to work with you again. Then say yes. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised. We spent the next hour catching up on personal news and discussing the changes at Hollowgate since Natalie's departure. She confirmed what I had suspected. Morale was plummeting, longtime employees were updating their resumes, and clients were growing concerned about stability. The Petersham account is particularly unhappy, Natalie mentioned. They've worked with you since the beginning, and they're nervous about the transition. Petersham Industries had been Hollowgate's first major client. Their CEO, Victoria Petersham, and I had developed a strong professional relationship over the years. That's good to know, I said, filing away the information. As we were preparing to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. Karen, it's Victoria Petersham. Heard about your departure from Hollowgate. Very concerning. Can we speak Monday? Important decisions to make. I showed Natalie the message. Well, she said with a low whistle. That didn't take long. No, I agreed. it didn't. The weekend was suddenly looking very interesting indeed. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing a confident but not ostentatious outfit. This wasn't about making a statement. It was about starting a new chapter professionally. Tom kissed me goodbye at the door. "Go show them what they're missing," he said with a proud smile. The Ironwood Forge offices occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, contemporary space with panoramic views of Minneapolis. The receptionist greeted me by name. "Director Delaney, welcome to Ironwood. Mr. Williams is waiting for you in the conference room." Director Delaney. The title still felt new but not uncomfortable. Douglas met me with a warm handshake. "Karen, right on time. Ready to meet your team?" "Absolutely," I replied, following him into a large conference room where about 15 people were gathered. "Everyone," Douglas announced, "this is Karen Delaney, our new Director of Operations. Many of you know her by reputation. We're incredibly fortunate to have her joining us." The welcome was genuine, the introduction smooth. I recognized a few faces from industry events, but most were new to me. I noted a healthy mix of experience levels and specialties, a well-constructed operations department. "And we have one more addition joining us today," Douglas continued, glancing at the door as it opened. Natalie walked in, looking slightly nervous but professionally composed. "This is Natalie Chen, our new senior operations manager, who will be reporting directly to Karen." I fought to keep my expression neutral, though inside I was jubilant. Natalie had made her decision. After the introductions, Douglas gave us a tour of the facilities, ending at my new office, corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door that connected to a smaller office that would be Natalie's. "I'll leave you to get settled," Douglas said. "We have a leadership meeting at 11 to discuss strategy." He paused at the door. "By the way, Victoria Petersham called this morning. She'd like to meet with us tomorrow." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'll be prepared." Once Douglas left, Natalie slipped into my office, closing the door behind her. "So," she said, barely containing her excitement, "we're really doing this." "We are," I confirmed. "Thank you for joining me." "Are you kidding? This is the opportunity of a lifetime." She glanced around the impressive office. "And not a bad place to land." "No," I agreed. "Not bad at all." Natalie became serious. "You should know, Hollowgate is in chaos. Word of your departure spread like wildfire on Friday afternoon. The operations team is panicking. Megan doesn't understand half the systems you built." This was valuable intelligence. "How do you know all this?" "I still have friends there," Natalie said with a small smile, "including Jason in IT. Jason Hall had been with Hollowgate almost as long as I had. He ran the IT department with quiet efficiency and had been a steadfast ally throughout my tenure. "Is he looking to make a move too?" I asked carefully. Natalie shrugged. "He didn't say explicitly, but he did mention how frustrating it is watching Torres and Megan dismantle working systems without understanding them." Another piece of information to file away. I would need to move carefully. Poaching one former colleague might be overlooked as coincidence. Systematically recruiting an entire team would be perceived correctly as a strategic attack. "Let's focus on getting established here first," I said. "We can discuss potential recruits later." Natalie nodded and stood to leave. "One more thing you should know," she added. "Megan's been frantically calling and emailing me all weekend, trying to figure out how to access your operational documentation." I smiled. "That's unfortunate for her. You didn't leave a transition plan?" I documented everything meticulously, I replied, but understanding the documentation requires context that Megan never bothered to learn. The leadership meeting at 11 introduced me to the rest of Ironwood's executive team. Douglas had assembled an impressive group, experienced professionals who asked intelligent questions and expressed genuine interest in my vision for the operations department. "Karen," Douglas said as the meeting wound down, "tell us about your approach to client transitions, particularly for companies switching from competitors." It was a perfectly timed opening to discuss what everyone in the room was thinking about: the potential for capturing Hollowgate's clients. "The key is continuity," I began. "Clients leave service providers when they feel their needs are no longer being met, or when they lose confidence in the provider's stability. Our task is to demonstrate that we understand their requirements and can meet them without disruption." I laid out my strategy: personalized transition plans, dedicated implementation teams, and regular check-ins throughout the process. "What we won't do," I emphasized, "is disparage Hollowgate or any other competitor. We focus on our strengths, not their weaknesses." The leadership team nodded approvingly. This was how professionals operated. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find an email from Victoria Petersham confirming our meeting for the following morning. With 16 years of history between us, I knew this wasn't a casual check-in. Victoria was seriously considering moving Petersham Industries' business from Hollowgate to Ironwood. My phone rang, Megan Russo's name appearing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the notification appeared. I pressed play, curious despite myself. "Karen, this is Megan Russo." Her voice sounded strained. "We need to discuss transition of your operational knowledge. Some of the documentation is unclear. Please call me back as soon as possible." Deleted. 5 minutes later, a text arrived from the same number. "This is unprofessional. The company needs your cooperation for a smooth transition." I smiled to myself. Megan was discovering that firing someone on a Friday afternoon with no transition period had consequences. Later that afternoon, Natalie joined me in my office to review the current status of Ironwood's operations processes. She had already identified several areas for improvement. "Their system works," she explained, "but it's not optimized. We could implement some of the refinements we developed at Hollowgate to increase efficiency by at least 20%. I nodded. "Draft a proposal. We'll present it to Douglas by the end of the week." My phone buzzed again, a call from Jessica in HR at Hollowgate. I ignored it. "They're getting desperate," Natalie observed. "They're discovering that institutional knowledge can't be transferred in a day," I replied, "especially when they didn't value it enough to arrange a proper handover." "Are you going to call them back?" I considered the question seriously. "No. I fulfilled all my contractual obligations. I owe them nothing more." As the day progressed, the calls and texts continued, from Megan, from Jessica, and finally, at 4:30 p.m., from Vivian Torres herself. Each message grew increasingly urgent. The last text from Torres was particularly revealing. "Karen, this is Vivian Torres. We may have been hasty in our decision. Please call to discuss possible arrangements." Too little, too late. By the end of my first day at Ironwood, I had outlined a comprehensive strategy for operational improvements, scheduled meetings with key team members, and prepared for tomorrow's discussion with Victoria Petersham. As I gathered my things to head home, Douglas stopped by my office. "Productive first day?" he asked. "Very," I replied. "I heard Hollowgate is trying desperately to reach you." I raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. In this industry? Always. Douglas leaned against the doorframe. Victoria Petersham called me again this afternoon. She's bringing her CTO to our meeting tomorrow. That was significant. Victoria wouldn't bring her technical leadership unless she was seriously considering a change. We'll be ready, I assured him. The meeting with Victoria Petersham and her CTO, Andrew Michaels, began formally but quickly warmed as we fell into the familiar rhythm of our long-standing professional relationship. I'll be direct, Karen, Victoria said after the initial pleasantries. Hollowgate's recent changes have us concerned. When we heard you'd been let go, that concern became alarm. Andrew nodded in agreement. The systems you built are integral to our operations. No one understands them like you do. Ironwood is prepared to offer you a comprehensive transition package, Douglas interjected smoothly. Karen would personally oversee the implementation. Victoria and Andrew exchanged glances. We'd need assurances of continuity, Victoria said cautiously. You'd have them, I promised. Plus improvements to the existing systems that I've been conceptualizing, but couldn't implement at Hollowgate. The meeting lasted 2 hours, during which we outlined a detailed transition plan. By the end, the decision was all but made. We'll need to review this with our legal team, Victoria said, gathering her materials. But barring any contractual issues, I believe we have an agreement in principle. As they left, Douglas turned to me with an appreciative nod. That, he said, was masterful. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated with 3 more major Hollowgate clients. Each cited similar concerns: uncertainty about Hollowgate's stability, lack of confidence in the new leadership, and, crucially, their trust in me personally. By the end of my 3rd week at Ironwood, we had successfully transitioned 4 of Hollowgate's largest accounts, representing nearly 30% of their annual revenue. The news made waves throughout the industry. Ironwood's stock rose. Hollowgate's fell. Analysts began questioning Torres' leadership and strategic vision. Through industry contacts, I heard that Megan had been demoted. The operations team at Hollowgate was in disarray, struggling to maintain service levels for remaining clients. It wasn't personal, just business. But I couldn't deny feeling a certain satisfaction. The final blow came unexpectedly in my 4th week at Ironwood. Jason Hall, Hollowgate's IT director, requested a meeting. I've been with Hollowgate almost as long as you were, he said when we met for coffee. But it's not the same company anymore. You're considering a move, I stated, not as a question. Jason nodded. And not just me. There are at least 6 senior team members ready to jump ship. This was a significant development. These were people with deep institutional knowledge, the backbone of Hollowgate's technical operations. Ironwood would be interested, I said carefully, but this would have to be handled delicately. Of course, Jason agreed. We're professionals. Within a month, Ironwood had added not only Jason, but 4 other key Hollowgate veterans to our growing team. Each brought valuable skills and client relationships. Each transition was managed ethically but strategically. The industry took notice. Investment firms began questioning Hollowgate's viability in the face of such significant talent and client drainage. 6 months after my unceremonious dismissal via Zoom, Hollowgate announced a strategic restructuring, corporate speak for significant downsizing. Vivian Torres resigned as CEO. Megan Russo was among those let go. Douglas found me in my office reviewing quarterly reports when the news broke. Congratulations, he said, dropping a newspaper on my desk with the headline, Hollowgate Systems announces major restructuring. CEO departs. I didn't do this for revenge, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. No, Douglas agreed with a knowing smile. You did it because you're the best operations director in the business, and they were fools to let you go. Their loss, I said. Our gain. The revenge had never been the point, but it was, undeniably, sweet. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. From the shock of dismissal to the triumph of building something even better at Ironwood. I had moved beyond personal vindication to professional reinvention.